welcome everyone to the Seeker's Compass, which is a core portion of All Faith Seminary's Mysticism program. We're very happy you're here. We're delighted that you have joined us. And I'd like to invite Dr. Keith Lowenstein to come forward and give us an opening meditation so that we can begin this wonderful excursion into mysticism. Keith, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm assuming it's morning for most everybody. Well, thank you for coming this morning. So we're going to start with a nice meditation. I'll lead you through a guided meditation, and I'd like everybody to first begin by just finding a good spot in however you're sitting to support your posture a little bit, because we'll be talking. We'll be working with posture a little bit. So if you're in a soft chair, move toward the front so that your sit bones, the hard bones that come through your buttocks, have some support, like the frame of the front of the couch, or if it's a soft, easy chair, just so we could settle in. So support. Very, very, very important. And then I'd like you to just further work with your posture. So we're going to take a deep breath, and we're going to breathe in and let our, just however you take a deep breath to start. Just a nice deep breath, in, out. Now I'd like you to connect with your coccyx and the crown of your head, and see about a straight line there. Can you grow a little bit on your next breath? With each breath, just paying attention to posture, and feel very supported by those sit bones. Your pelvis supported by the chair or the couch, that's supported by the ground, down into the earth. So there's a lot of support there. Let's gently have you come back to the room.
Yes, that was a very deep meditation.
Thank you, everybody, for participating. Okay, bud.
All right. Thank you, Keith. I appreciate that. So let's talk about what we're doing today. Our journey today is with the three leaders of the mystical program at All Faith Seminary. And that is, of course, Reverend Dr. Jon Mundy, Reverend Keith Lowenstein, MD, and myself, Reverend Dr. Bud James. So here's how we're going to be doing this today. We've already started our introductions and overview, our centering meditation. And what's next is the three of us will be sharing our mystical journeys, where we've been in this lifetime on our path towards God. We're then going to do a light overview of All Faith Seminary's Mysticism program, and hopefully from our experiences that we share, it might add some insights or guidance to your mystical path. And of course, we want to make sure that we're looking at all of these components in a way that makes sense to you, makes sense to us, gives you a little bit of insight, and hopefully provides an opportunity for you to ask questions and engage us as well, because we're more than happy to talk about it. In fact, the three of us pretty much think talking about God may be one of the most fun and enjoyable and important things that we do in our lives. So feel free to put any questions in chat for the Q&A. Just at a high level, All Faith Seminary International is starting this program, the Mysticism program, very specifically as a result of us realizing, gee, we actually have a lot of knowledge and experience and depth here. And we're going to be exploring Christian mysticism, Sufism, A Course in Miracles, Zen, Vedanta, Kabbalah, nature mysticism, and more. And if you've ever wondered what the ancient mystics did to get closer to God, or if you'd like to know what the modern mystics are doing, that is something that we are going to be exploring. And it will help you deepen your spiritual practice. And we've got all three levels. We're offering interfaith minister, master's, and a doctorate program in mysticism. The Seeker's Compass, which is this program, is a core part of the mystical curriculum. So every month we talk to modern mystics and we ask them about their spiritual journey. We have specific questions that we ask them, and the three of us will be answering these questions today. So today's program is a good part of this series and also really the very beginning of it. Now, the questions that we ask our mystics, you're going to see this a few times, so I won't go through each one, but we'll answer each one. We'll go through them. And I got elected to start, so I'll start talking about me. Not something I do a lot of, but I'm going to share a little bit. So hopefully some of my experiences can help you in looking through the lens of what is it like? Because in our view, everyone's a mystic. And we say that because we recognize that everyone, whether they realize it or not, is on a path to the divine. And the definition of a mystic is simply that: someone who seeks to know the heart and mind of God in however they see it and however they experience it. And what's really fascinating, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, is mystics start to sound the same from belief system to belief system. Okay, about me. I was born in San Diego, raised in a Presbyterian family. We went to church on Sundays and holidays, not much else. My step granddad was Jewish, and San Diego had a very strong Catholic population. So I was raised in an interfaith setting without realizing it until much, much later in my life. And I always loved reading. I was an avid reader and became a very, very avid comic book reader and really dove deeply into comics. In fact, I would take on odd jobs and mowing lawns and things like that just to pay for my comic book addiction. Because obviously I didn't have enough to buy every comic from my small monthly income that I made. But nonetheless, it was a lot of fun. And looking back, I now realize that comics and reading everything I could get my hands on, including the Bible cover to cover twice. We had a wonderful encyclopedia at home. I read that, the entire Lord of the Rings set, endless other books, lots of sci-fi, and it really became the background of my life. And reading about the good guys and the bad guys and thinking about the divine, one day I realized that we all have secret superpowers. I remember very clearly this one day when I was about 10. I had been binging all morning long, reading comics and just really going into that alternate universe. Having this recognition that we all have secret superpowers. So I walked into my backyard. I raised my hand to the sky and I vowed with every fiber of my 10-year-old self to only use my superpowers for good. And it still brings up a lot of feelings for me. And that very tearful, heartfelt moment taught me that I can align my heart and my mind with the divine. And I like to think that to this day, I only use my superpowers for good. As I got a little older, I started having horrible repeating nightmares and night terrors when I was about 12. I would end up screaming in the middle of the night at the top of my lungs in a sweat. And I just scared my brother would share and I shared a room and I would just scare him to death. And of course, the rest of my family horribly. The challenge was mental health wasn't a really big deal back then, as far as a lot of folks thought in the 60s. And so, other than saying, okay, no more scary movies for you and no late night pizza, there wasn't really a lot of help on how to deal with this. So I had to get my own answers. And as an avid reader, I started exploring the mind. There wasn't much at school, so I went to the public library and became a regular fixture in the public library. I wanted to understand dreams and nightmares. I found out that Dr. Jung had a lot to say, a lot of cool things to say about dreams, but not how to stop them. And interestingly, because of the Dewey Decimal System used in the public library, the books on dreams and sleep were right next to these books on hypnosis. And since I'd read all the other ones, I pulled out a book or two on hypnosis and I went, oh, hey, uh, this might be an answer, self hypnosis. So I began studying and I eventually, after a few months, wrote a script to stop my dreams. And I actually just focused on my nightmares in the beginning. And lo and behold, a month went by, no more nightmares. And of course, every night I was doing this as I went to sleep. But I wasn't sure, gee, did it really work or not? Or am I just, in a lull between night terrors? And I kicked up the trance to turn off all my dreams. So I would wake up the next morning. I'm sure I dreamed during the night. I dreamt. I'm unquestionably sure of that, but I didn't remember them. And I didn't get woken up in the middle of the night. That turned on this huge light bulb about the power of the mind. And since I was very, very interested in God at the time, it was also something that I realized I started wondering about the mind of God. And it was just this fascinating insight for myself. So that was when I committed to fully reading the Bible. I joined a Pentecostal church, went really deep into it. It was really fascinating. And that really began my personal relationship with Jesus and the divine. Later in high school, I had this incredible, once in a lifetime opportunity to study Scientology without going to Scientology. And after 2 years, I was declared clear. What that did was it taught me so many things, but one of the most important was how to be less affected by the world around me and create a sense of center and focus and clarity. After high school, I joined the Air Force as an air traffic controller and then volunteered for Air Force Special Operations Combat Control. I learned how to jump out of airplanes, scuba dive, technical rock climbing. And while I was stationed in the Philippines, I became a scuba instructor and started teaching. I also learned a lot about self-discipline and willpower. I learned how to fully take care of myself in nearly any situation and still remain calm. They thought I was a brilliant airman and was selected to go to the Air Force Academy. And I have much to say about that experience, both good and bad. But I'll summarize by saying that I left the military and resigned my commission when I felt that the mental programming of treating others as less than human started to creep in, and it no longer aligned with my own sense of right and wrong. And it taught me something very important, and that is that I can't compromise my feelings and viewpoints about other human beings. I recognized them long ago as spirit in a body. We're so much more than just this. And so after the military, I pursued one of my greatest joys, scuba diving. I became a research marine biologist. I joined a team that was working for Southern California Edison to dive the entire Southern California coastline to map it, all the underwater fauna and flora, because they wanted to put up another power plant. And they were trying to figure out where they would put it. And so we did this 18-month study and I was diving 9 to 15 times a week, plus teaching scuba on the weekends. Needless to say, I went through thousands of dives, over 4,000 total in my lifetime. I found that exploring Mother Nature from underwater was one of the most beautiful, brilliant, incredible things I've ever done. I was thoroughly comfortable underwater. In fact, I would sometimes just drop off the side of the boat when things were a little slow, clip a carabiner, and take a nap underwater. Yeah, it was a lot calmer underwater than it was on the boat going up and down. But it was also this amazing experience when you're simply floating weightlessly in a beautiful kelp forest surrounded by this unbelievable, gorgeous environment, this ecosystem. There was no distraction. There's no nagging voices in my head, no to-do lists, just the sound of the ocean, my bubbles, and the feeling of divine presence that just went all the way down from my head to my fins. It was an amazing experience. Absolutely wonderful. At a young age, my life split basically into three tracks. Scuba diving was my hobby. I continued to pursue it. It's an expensive hobby, so I realized I needed a job that would pay for all of that. I had God deeply in my heart, and I pursued all three with a great deal of enthusiasm. And the three rarely met. It was very interesting. I was the original CTO at MySpace.com. I was the key creator in designing and managing the world's first social media platform. In 9 months, we brought on board over 6 million users. It was an amazing experience. I learned a lot from there. At Unisys, I worked with large companies and I was building out huge computer systems at BEA. I was the global manager of all of its data centers around the world. And at Oracle, I was the global manager of backup operations. Interestingly enough, in 2001, I joined Memory Spring, which is this amazing organization designed to teach classes and training programs on brain and body health, memory, productivity, stress management, and a lot more. And since the pandemic, I started teaching full time because we teach all 95% of our classes online. So that's been my technical experience. That's been absolutely amazing for me. But if I jump back into my early 30s, I joined a 2-year program with the Church of Divine Man where I received my first ordination. And while I was in that program, about, I don't know, 18 months or so into it, I literally stumbled onto a course in miracles. It was really kind of an interesting thing. My wife and I were in a New Age bookstore in Marin, and it was a big bookstore. It had literally classic racks of books like a library. And I was just going around looking at all these amazing books. I turned the corner and went down one particular row, and this blue book fell out right in front of me while I stepped into the aisle. And I looked at the blue book and I went and picked it up. Huh. And it was one of the older versions. It was version 2 of Course in Miracles. So there were more of them on the shelf. And then I went around to look on the other side of the book shelf to see if anybody, I'm laughing while I was doing this, see if anybody pushed the book out. No. And so I go, okay, clearly this book is for me. I picked up that and its other text. So there was the text, the workbook, and then there was this little other handout that I wasn't sure of. I took all those to the counter immediately and I said, I think these books are for me. And sure enough, I began my studies into A Course in Miracles, and it was absolutely amazing. When I moved to Reno in 2006, I decided to take my spiritual path even deeper. I met Dr. Hamilton, Donna Hamilton, who is also on a lifetime deep spiritual path, also a course student, also interestingly a graduate of the Church of Divine Man, and which was a stunning sense of coincidences. And I realized there are no coincidences in God's universe. And we co-created a company called New Vistas International, and it was a certified school in Nevada where we taught spiritual counseling. I also started an ACIM study group, and I ran that for 10 years. Both of these were deeply, deeply rewarding. Along the way, I took my hypnotherapy training to a much, much deeper level by studying between lives soul regression therapy. I read, as always, several books and then took multiple training programs with Dr. Linda Bachman and became a certified between life soul regression therapist. It was very humbling, and it was an incredible experience to escort clients to and through significant past lives, past events, and the learnings that would come from those were, I mean, they would sometimes bring tears to all of our eyes as we were in that process. That combined with the experience that the constant messaging of the course is that I'm an immortal being having a temporary human experience just became deeper and deeper to where it stopped being a belief and it was just an isness, a knowingness, an absolute awareness of the truth of that. Donna and I co-created a program called the Pause Model of Spiritual Counseling, which was pretty much representing both of our life's work. And it is the distillation of all of the knowledge that we learned. P of the pause model stands for present, A, aware witness, U, unwind the past, S, surrender, and E, evoke essence. I'm not going to go into a lot about this, but needless to say, at All Faith Seminary International, I wrote my dissertation for my PhD as well as my master's thesis on the pause model. And it was a wonderful experience. The course for both Donna and I are our true north, and it was underneath of everything that we built in the pause model was the messages of ACIM. Now, I've been reading Jon's Miracles magazine for a very long time, and I learned about All Faith Seminary from reading articles and then ads in Miracles magazine. And that was in the 90s. And I finally decided that I had this vision board that I had created, and I had All Faiths on it because I wanted to take all three of the programs. And I finally did. I joined. And that has become this amazing experience for me from 2011 up until today. And it continues to be. So that's a little bit about my path. Let's talk about the questions that we have. Well, I've shared with you my path. How do I experience the divine? For me, it starts in my heart when I feel this openness, this connection of peace, of joy, of gratitude, and a sense of awareness. As I mentioned, scuba diving, I have many times been in that space where I'm just so enamored by everything that's going on around me and through me. Everything then slowly just disappears. And there's this sense of oneness, of completeness. And lots of people have tried to explain this state, and we run out of words. And I will continue to try. So I kind of shared that. What is my experience? What do I feel? What do I hear? What do I see? What are my thoughts when I'm deeply aware of divine presence? Um, I would say that the most important, the most significant aspect for me, and it isn't one that I'm aware of in the moment, but I'm aware of later, is that your ego disappears. All of the noise that's associated with it It's just simply not there. Challenges that I've had on my mystical path. Well, here's an interesting thing. I'm obviously deeply into technology. I was a long, long time ago really thinking about going into medicine, but computers just drew me. I just absolutely loved everything about them and went into the technical path. Started playing Pong when it was first out, if any of you are aware of Pong, and I've been a gamer ever since. It's one of my other hobbies. But interestingly enough, the technical community and the spiritual community don't connect very much. You don't hear a lot about God in the middle of a data center rebuild or when you're dealing with writing millions of lines of code to come with some outcome. And it's there. Some people will talk about it, but it's pretty difficult. What I would try to do whenever possible was bring up some simple core thoughts like the golden rule. Also, my family didn't always accept my path because it was rather unique. They didn't always appreciate what I was doing, and I had to learn how to be my own counsel in that matter and regard and realize that when I'm sharing my path, some people can take it as an invalidation of their path, and that's never what I wanted. But that can be the mental process that they go through. They go, oh, gee, Bud's doing this, he's doing that. I'm not doing those things. Maybe I'm wrong. And of course, that was never be my approach at all. The motto at All Faith Seminary is not instead of, in addition to. And so we start to realize is that there's a lot of ways to connect with the divine and there is no one path. And so it's not that your path is wrong and my path is right. I don't believe in that level of division at all. And I ran into a lot of that along the way. What do I love about my path? Everything. I love the fact that I have a unshakable experience of connecting with the divine, and it really won't matter what happens. And I have a knowingness about this the rest of my life. It does not matter. I will not lose that connection. That gives me more peace and more happiness and more joy than absolutely anything. My daily practice as I first awaken, before I get out of bed in the morning, I do a meditation, and it's a gratitude meditation, and I spend time. Sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 30. It just depends on how I feel in that moment of just communing with God. And I talk to Jesus, I talk to my guides, I have these wonderful conversations, and it's I don't ask for anything. It is simply an expression of love, of joy, of peace. And I do this very same thing uh, when I go to sleep at night. And so it's a sandwich for me. It starts my day and it ends my day. Throughout my day, one part of my spiritual practice, one part of my ministry is working at All Faith Seminary. So I get to talk with people about God, one of my happiest things. I have an ongoing reading practice. Right now, I happen to be reading Ken Wapnick's Journey through the workbook. It'll take a while to read through that, but it's brilliant. It's wonderful. It's just like having Ken next to you, pointing out, "Hey, look at that. We talk about that over here." It's really terrific. Highly recommend it for anyone who's not in an AFSI program, because let me tell you what, it will take up all of your thinking and all of your mindset. How would a new seeker begin to explore this path? Well, guess what? We'll talk about that a little bit later. And so that's it for me. That's a little bit about my path and answering my questions. And we'll give you an opportunity to ask questions. If you've got any questions of me, I'm happy to answer them. Alice, you have your hand raised. Yes.
Yeah, I thought your path was interesting and diverse there. I've been asking myself too, and trying to understand the difference between mystical metaphysical and spiritualist paths, or if they're really all the same thing, just different words for the same thing. Because I've been going more under deeper understanding of myself as a medium and exploring more the spiritualist path lately with other teachers and mediums and trying to understand my own abilities. And how would you define the difference in that, since you've called this program mystics rather than metaphysic or spiritualist or just plain spiritual?
It's a great question. I would agree with you when it's really all pointing at the same topic. It may be a different view, but one way to look at it is as if you're looking through a multifaceted diamond. You're looking at the same core, but just through a slightly different lens, right? Spirituality would have a different perspective than one might say metaphysics, right? And it might include different topics. It's all still pointing at God. And it's also, what term are you comfortable with? I think that's also a point there. We've used the term mystics because it goes way back, right? It's actually a pretty old term, and it really becomes this understanding of when you look at, and by the way, one of our books is titled "What is Mysticism?" written by none other than Dr. Jon. And it really goes into a deep understanding of that. And it touches on all those topics that you mentioned, Alice.
Yeah, I
Great
took a
point.
course from a metaphysical minister that's been helping me for like 37 years since my psychic opening, and he gave a history of metaphysics that literally goes back thousands of years, starting
Yeah.
with Hermes and some other mystics of ancient path. And I'm trying to understand a lineage in all of this too, and an historical understanding. To me, the spiritualism seems to be a little more contemporary with the Fox sisters. I'm just trying to
Sure.
understand the history of all this too, and how would
Yeah.
you present that as part of like a history of spiritual paths, as well as deep within our psyche on a global level? What are some of the Eastern and now Western views and all of this?
It's a good question. I think that there's let me back up. I think the best way to answer it, Alice, is how I perceive religions. Okay. This is one of the conversations I typically have. Think of a religion like Buddhism or Catholicism, Judaism, as a frequency or a chord, so to speak, right? So it has this vibration. The people that have that same type of vibration or feel in accordance with that vibration are going to be attracted to it, right? And there's no wrong chord in music. There's discord, but there's no wrong chord. Does that make sense? And so what's going to happen is that the vibration of this particular belief system is going to attract someone, and they may stay at that vibration, that frequency their entire life. Or they may start to vibrate a little higher. And as they start to vibrate higher and higher, they're not saying that the previous vibrations are wrong. It's just a higher frequency. That's where we start to see the mystical components of all of these belief systems. And what's fascinating is up here at this mystical level, they all start to meet, they all start to match, they all start to say the same thing. And it becomes, if you look at the terms that you used, those each have their own little vibration, their own frequency. And people who have that same vibration are going to be attracted to it, to that lens, if you will, to use a different metaphor.
I guess you could say that all the world religions have some kind of mystical or spiritual encounter with other realms as part of their beginnings.
They must.
To even have then something evolved, a person then shared it, and then teachings, and then
Absolutely.
whatever. But
Absolutely. Yeah.
and thanks for
And
sharing your journey and perspective and all this. I'm still trying to understand it, being raised Unitarian Universalist, and I was encouraged to study all the world religions, and I've looked into all the world religions, but somehow at some point this resonation with the Course in Miracles I felt deeply guided to and devoted in this inner teacher role in
yeah.
my life. So I'm glad to be amongst some other course students too, because it seems very rewarding path. But I'm still trying to sort out the other stuff too. It's like, why are all these other things happening, and how does it relate to my spiritual path?
Yes, I understand that completely.
Because
I
I'd
do.
shared with Jon, since my sister passed early in the year, she's literally trying to speak through my vocal cords, and I'm going, well, that's a whole nother level. I haven't had that experience before, so I'm trying to seek resources to sort out and honor and understand that.
Yeah, definitely get some training on channeling. There's a lot to learn in that space.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And ownership and seniority, very, very key concepts in channeling. But that's a whole nother topic. All right. Well,
Okay.
thank you, Alice. I appreciate your question. I've got a couple questions in chat here. How is AI informing your new work? Well, now that's a great topic. Actually, I use AI quite a lot, and I use it because what I've found is it's better than a blank slate. Instead of starting with a blank piece of paper, I can actually ask different AI platforms, different questions, get some insights, and it'll allow me to fine tune and improve um, my thoughts and organize my thoughts. It still isn't perfect. It's still brand new and it still hallucinates a little bit. So you have to take everything with many grains of salt. I have a question here. Thank you, Larry. So, who declared me clear? Well, that's an interesting question. I really am not going to talk about who I was trained with, but what I did do is I went into a center and got tested. That's who declared me clear. So it was a real center. Um, and I have a question about. Hi, Elena. Uh, my relationship with my spirit guides. That was part of the Church of Divine Man's training program, was to learn how to engage and interact with my spirit guides and use them as part of my healing process, and recognize that healing doesn't come from the healer. You are, in fact, a conduit for the divine. And Reiki is another example of that same type of energetic healing that we learned. It's just a little different format. And it was very, very powerful experience in learning how to do that. And I use those techniques to this day, and they work. They are really absolutely amazing. Let's see, another question. How would others start my path? It just depends on what you're drawn to and what you're attracted to. You heard my path started with studying the mind and hypnotherapy. And I've been using self hypnosis literally since I was 12. For me, there's nothing more important than having my mind focused and clear, because everything else is second to that. You all have experienced brain fog, and you know how life goes really south really fast when your brain ain't working and your mind is not working. So for me, that's where it starts. And then you start to take that next step. And for me, as I mentioned, it was okay, there's my mind, there's other people's minds. That's kind of cool. Well, what about the mind? And it was Jung who actually started me thinking about that, because he talks about the the collective consciousness, and that's where I started thinking about God. So there you go. Hi, Lynn.
Wow. Thank you, Bud. Namaste, mighty companions. Oh, I love it. Thank you so much for sharing. It amazes me. We come from all different parts, all over. I had night terrors when I was younger, and I remember going to stay with my aunt, and I woke her up because I was screaming. She thought I did it on purpose. I said, no, no, no. And she gave me this, it's a Jewish prayer book called a Siddur. She says, say
Mm,
prayer. My nightmares went away.
wow.
It was my first miracle that I remember. Yeah, I'm so grateful for us. Thank you so much, Bud. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Appreciate you very much. All right. Well, I think that that was it, and that's interesting. And if you want to reach out and ask me questions later, I'm more than happy to chat. I'd rather talk about God than me, but hey, here we go. All right. So next up, we have Reverend Keith Lowenstein. So, Dr. Keith, would you like to come forward and share your experiences?
All right. Well, hi, everyone. So this is an interesting thing to do, sit here and talk about your path, I have to say. I've really been playing with this realm as far as I can remember. So for me, it goes back to, maybe even there are some memories from 3 years old or so, but certainly, shortly after that. Over the years, I've had training in art, various kinds of spiritual practices, as well as science. And that's been really a wonderful journey and allowed me to pull all these things together. I would say that Mother Nature was a very, very early teacher for me. Certainly, certainly very powerful, even though I grew up in New York City. Um, I would find nature there, and, she would talk to me. And so and kind of always kind of drew me out to, go to the edges of the city and find, the woods or the shore or whatever, the harbor, whatever I could find. I was very lucky early on to get exposed to the religious paintings of the Italian Renaissance. And so as soon as I could walk, well, even before that, I think, I was exposed to huge, beautiful masterpieces of all the glorious stories in the Christian Bible, with the massive, luscious Renaissance paintings that were around New York City. So I quickly got exposed to Jesus, and I was young enough and looked at those pictures, and they didn't seem unusual to me. It was like, well, yeah, well, that's just part of how things are. So it's very interesting. So I've had a meditation practice. I started to play around with meditation when I was very young. I mean, definitely before 5. I'll give you that example. Wow, having a practice for so many years, it's fascinating. It's just fascinating to have a practice for that amount of time, because you still get great insights and old teachings that you were given or experienced. You get to see in new light. During the pandemic that we just went through, in about the time when people were starting to venture out a little bit, a few people had vaccines or, this or that, we had some neighbors over, and we were sitting outside, and this fellow asked me, or just general conversation, right? He was like, well, what do you do for stress, Keith? And I was like, oh, well, I have this meditation practice. And he said, oh, that's something I could never do. I was never able to do. And that's a very important teaching point with meditation. But what came to me at the moment was, and I hadn't realized it until then, it just gets more and more and more interesting as the years go by. Mm-hmm. It's just the what you learn is tremendous, and it's always there and it's always with you. However, you learn to tap into it, and everybody has different ways of tapping in, and that's, I think, the important thing to know is that everyone's is learning to speak the other languages and learning from other people's experiences. And Rabbi Gelberman, that was his phrase. Although I like to flip it a little bit. I like to say always in addition to is how I like to start it. Not instead of. So always in addition to. It's just just welcome and have a curiosity and an interest in that. Now, my formal kind of meditation training is in the Indian traditions, right? South Asian Indian tradition. And so as I study that, so I've been practicing, I would describe myself as a practitioner. But, in last, 10 years, I've been, researching more and reading more and reading scripture more. And, that's all very helpful. It's also very helpful to read that, after experiences. Boy, the insights are very different than before experiences. But the Indians, yoga, which is a very broad, which, we think of as, what happens at the corner store where people go to become strong pretzels. But actually, there's a little bit more to that with yoga. And it's such a rich tradition. And they realized early on that people respond to different techniques. And so that's kind of built into their system, which is wonderful and very, very inviting. So having a practice of some type is and being religious about that, right? So what does that term really mean, right? It's really, just to have something that you don't a procedure, a practice that you don't really vary from. I mean, it can grow, and you don't want anything to be rigid. You want it to be alive and, growing with you. But it is that persistence over time. So yeah, so in childhood, I used to have this, also dreams. Dreams were a very big part of my introduction to the spirit world. And I also had an induction technique. I would have this technique, and only recently I realized what it was. But I was, I know from where I was sleeping, and kind of my siblings that were around, how old I was. So, somewhere between 4 and 5, and so I would go to sleep, and I would go to this place, and in my mind's eye, I would, there'd be kind of like this cosmic. So remember, I'm 4 or 5 years old. So, I have a picture of the stars, just space. And then in the middle, there would be this, rotating, whitish light that I would focus on, that would kind of, move like this. And I would stay focused on that. And, it would take me to this other place where I was doing work and kind of learning things and blah, blah. But what was that white light that I was looking at? Well, it was Humpty Dumpty. I was watching Humpty Dumpty roll over, like the egg, just into space. And, in recent years, I was like, oh, that's how, kind of spirit pulled me into, oh, okay, we're going to get this eye's attention, and we're going to get it this way, so boom, off I went. And then I realized that many of the techniques, so I would go to this place, and I would be taught kind of certain things and have to practice to kind of have more freedom in a way, right? Like I would be freer and have, more movement and more joy the more I kind of got these practices down. And then years later, when I was 20, I met my meditation, 22, I met my meditation teacher. I'll talk about that. But years after that, I realized, oh, goodness gracious, some of these very subtle things I was trying to do way back then are exactly what my teacher taught me to do, years and years later. So I'm still playing with some of those subtle techniques. So anyway, I ended up in this stuff from an early age, and nature was always a big piece, and exploring. I always liked to explore, and my art interest took me deeper into art, into some of the more contemporary religious artists and or spiritual artists. I guess it's some blasphemy really in my family. My grandfather was a very classically trained, self-trained art historian, and was not a fan of what in the 60s was referred to as, modern art or abstract art. But I ended up, becoming in love with, late Turners and then Rothko. Just kind of the other the other side of that. But it was anyway, I will move to a little bit of the training that I received. See. So just a little blurb of this is an introductory slide. So Kriya Yoga is the meditation that I was taught at 22, and I'll talk about that. And this is just this is my title slide for when I give an introductory lecture on Kriya. But I'm going to just pull up a couple slides. This was my teacher, and this was my dog. And these are the basic practices of yogic meditation: posture, breath, third eye focus, and some repetitive sound. And it's similar to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras or Raja Yoga, and actually in my studies I really have not found a major mystical sect of any religion that doesn't have these practices as part of it. So you learn these practices, and then you practice the practices. You play with the edges. You see where it goes. It's a creative way to move through various states of awareness, and you learn like very fine ways to change what you're doing, kind of micromodulation. And when you get these things kind of going together, you end up in meditation. And no belief is necessary here. It's experience. And so that's a very big important piece for me, is experience. And I think for anyone who's written about spiritual experiences, that is a very important thing. So these are like my teachers or my teachers' teachers. I think I'm going to start off here a little bit with Rabbi Gelberman, who helped found this All Faith Seminary. And I met him in the early 80s. I actually met him on Easter Sunday, a Sunday that I turned 25. He was part of an interfaith celebration at Christ Church on Park Avenue in New York City, and somehow somebody he knew somebody who knew me, and my teacher at the time, this gentleman that went as Ganesh Baba. So I first met him on that day, and there was a beautiful presentation. We spent the day together with also Swami Satchidananda and Pir Vilayat Khan and some others. And I think Reverend Jon Mundy was typically at this yearly presentation also, but he heard I was coming, and so he didn't come that day for whatever reason. I don't know. So it took me. I had to wait another 35, almost 40 years to meet him, because he was too busy that morning. What can you do, huh? So
I'm laughing in case anybody wants to know. Go ahead.
Anyway, this is another very interesting person, Hilda Charlton. And John actually, I knew her in New York because we were both in New York at the time. And she was also had a pretty important influence on me. Very short, but quite important. And so this was my main teacher, and I'll talk about how I met him in a second. And so he really taught me Kriya Yoga meditation. So the lineage I'm from, it's from this Yogananda lineage. Many people know who Yogananda is. The person who started this particular lineage was Lahiri Mahasaya. And he had many students. These are two of them. This was my teacher's main student or main teacher, although this person, Lahiri, saved his life when he was a child. And then he ended up his main teacher. Sanyal was the youngest teacher of Lahiri. And this person also taught Ganesh Baba. I have teachings from a few of these others, from this person and this person, this person. And this is Swami Shivananda, who's very famous, who Ganesh Baba approached to become a Swami. And then Ganesh Baba worked for Nandamaya Ma for 10 years, running one of her ashrams. So that's kind of the, the background a little bit of that. I'm going to share this. So Ganesh Baba used to dance around and prance around and sing this with his cymbals sometimes, and it's really, at least I just find this perfect. It's written by, Wordsworth. It's Longfellow, and it's not some ancient hidden Upanishad line that had to be translated. It's I think a English equivalent of something that has a lot of meaning, though, as that. So, trust no future, however pleasant. Let the dead past bury its dead. Act in the living present. God with heart within and God overhead. And this is all about being present, all about mindfulness, all about, doing something positive in the world, and from where you come, from compassion and from connection with spirit, and onward we go. We are certainly at a challenging time. So meditation is really so helpful. And part of this program, the Master's program, is to encourage practices. So we're really encouraging people to really fine-tune their practice when they join this Master's program. And many people get frustrated with regards to that, and they're like, oh, I can't meditate. But I don't know about you, but most people periodically, if they're driving a long way, their attention wanders and they hit the little bumps on the side of the road, bup, 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 and they come back right onto the road, and it's no problem. I mean, I'm always interested to hear, but I haven't met anyone yet who loses their attention, hits the bump, pulls over on the side of the road, calls the police, say, oh, I can't drive, and turns over their keys and license to them. I think they just refocus and keep going. And so so any spiritual practice, that's what's important, right? That's what's important, is the persistence. And that's the practice, is fine-tuning attention. Attention's really the only thing that we have that we can really control to any great degree. And we are in a challenging time. And so I think we all want to work on changing our vibration. And think about, that we're in a moment where we need psycho-spiritual evolution. And think about that as the inner revolution, because if you change your vibration, then everyone you interact with all day long will be influenced by that. And that's the goal of this program, is to really give people a greater ability to do that and to be able to have a little more control over it, right? So how do we do that? It's learning more about what's sacred, right? What is what is sacred to you, and everything can be sacred. And our breath is sacred, and as we take each breath, it's something that we can continue to focus on and try to refine. What we want to ultimately do is find our teacher that is within, right? So there's instructors, but it's up to you to find what's inside. So nature is really and breath. The essence of your breath is really joy, and it helps bring about synchronicity. So I really
And Keith, can you, if you're ready, can you speak to our core questions?
Oh, sure, that's probably a good idea. Yeah. So, I guess that's a great first question. So how do I experience the divine? I think, for me, the breath is just so powerful that learning your relationship with breath and how that is kind of our gift of life from God, from Spirit, And that relationship is how I experience the divine. So joy, bliss, compassion, love, connection, all connected with the breath. There's a neuroscientist I know and a Kriya yogi who's left his body, but who I knew 40 years ago. And they both use the same phrase as what everybody is looking for is constant calmness. And that spot in between your breath, when you learn to modulate your nervous system to a point of deep, deep, deep relaxation, allows all of the more subtle energies to become more prevalent and right there for you. So what do you experience when you feel, hear, see thoughts, etc., when you're deeply aware of the divine presence? I guess I answered that to some degree, but, joy, bliss, connection, love, peace, and energy. What challenges have you had on your mystical path? Well, I think when I was younger, I didn't always listen to the direction I was getting on the path. So what challenges have I had? Sometimes just ignoring what's in front of my face, I think. And what do I love about my path? I just love how I feel, the connection, the essence, just the beauty and the love, and, and sharing that. I practice, well, ideally I practice with every breath, but I certainly have a practice twice daily where I, focus and sit down and spend 15 minutes at a minimum, probably when I was, working more regularly, and then occasionally longer, an hour or two or so on a weekend. But it is a daily practice, daily. How would I suggest the seeker to explore? Well, if someone's interested in Kriya, they certainly can contact me, but nature and breath. And breath starts with posture. You cannot fully breathe until you're sitting straight. And it interferes with the volume of the air that you can take in. And learning to balance that and play with your nervous system and realize that you can, when you shift your awareness from without to within, how powerful that can be. Yogananda has a beautiful saying: the spine and the brain are the altars of God. That's where the electricity of God flows down into the nervous system, into the world, and the searchlights of your center, the searchlights of your senses are turned outwards. But when you reverse these searchlights through meditation or whatever practice, and they're concentrated in your central nervous system, you will behold the Maker. And so that's from Yogananda. And in my experience, I guess the other thing I love about my path is the synchronicity. The synchronicity. It just infuses in your life. So that's what I have to share today. I hope that was helpful for people, interesting. I'm all for spiritual practice, just in case you missed that point.
I think we did get that point. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, Keith, I just want to say that I think not listening to our guidance is part of our spiritual path. I really do. I don't think I've met anybody that's not had that experience. And Ken Wapnick in the Journey series actually talks about that. He says that there's no such thing as a perfect course student. And if you are meticulous about doing everything, crossing every T, dotting every I, etc., you're actually not doing the course right, because you're supposed to fail. You're supposed to work on that notion of forgiveness of yourself, pick yourself up and keep going, right? And go, okay, well, laugh at yourself a little bit and then keep moving. So that's really important. And if folks have any questions, please put them in chat or raise your hand. We'd be happy to hear from you or talk with you.
Yeah, I see one here, Within You and Without You by George Harrison. That is, it's funny, I skipped that slide, but if you look back at the, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, that album, has the main yogis from the Kriya Yoga lineage hidden in, that group of people. It's fascinating. Yeah. George Harrison, he would give Autobiography of a Yogi away quite a bit during his life. I'm looking for any books, teachers, retreats that talk about the intersection of teaching, not the course per se. So teachings of the course and the Gita. I don't know of any particularly that way. That'd be an interesting thing to explore.
And one other comment I want to make, and that is, Keith, if folks are interested in learning Kriya from you, would you like to put your website in chat, and people can click on that? You do studies about every 3 months, right? You start a new training program?
Yes. I have another class starting actually October 12th. So I teach a 6-week class 4 times a year. On the 12th, there'll be an introductory lecture where I'll show a bunch of slides and talk a little more about it. And then the following week it starts. It's Saturdays at 9 a.m. Pacific time. And it runs for about an hour, a little more often. And we go through like those practices. Week 1 is posture, week 2, every week you get a new breathing technique, but so posture, breath, third eye practices, how to use sound and repetitive prayer. And then compassion, a week on compassion, and then a week on, more kind of subtle energy management. So that's starting. Yes, I did. Yes, Hari Harinanda. I have initiations from a variety of different Kriya lines. None of which I asked for, really, and all of which I was kind of told to sit down and it's here. But yeah, back in probably 83 or so, I think, and I spent time with Hari Harinanda in New York. In fact, one afternoon I was with, Hari Harinanda for a couple hours, and then, Ganesh Baba for, the rest of the day and night or whatever. So yeah, I was pretty immersed in this and didn't really know what I was getting into when I started. So, but it's been great. It's been just wonderful. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And next up, we're going to have Reverend Dr. Jon Mundy, the star of our program. He's going to share a little bit about himself and his history and his background. And we really look forward to it. So he has lots to say, and he's certainly been there, done that. Over to you, Dr. Jon.
Well, hi, everyone. And thanks, Bud, and thanks, Keith. It's a lot of fun talking about mysticism because there's really nothing more important. By that, I simply mean there's nothing more important than what Keith and Bud have been emphasizing, which is namely the relationship we have with God. That's the relationship, the deep relationship. Of course, the relationship we have with God is the relationship we have with everyone, with the whole of life, with every being, especially those that are closest to us. But as Keith was emphasizing, nature and, again, the heart of every soul and every animal and everything. So I'll try to be brief. I grew up on a farm in Missouri. Many know that, during the 1940s and the 1950s. That was a very different time. No television. The telephone was a wooden box on the wall in the kitchen. You literally cranked the thing. Very primitive compared to today's time, but also very beautiful. Our farm was isolated, set on a hill. You could look north, south, east, west, see nothing but land, hills, trees. And I had a very rich experience in nature. Nature was as close as the back of our barn. And we had a section down a little further south of us that we called the 10 Acres Woods. I think that's from Winnie the Pooh, but it's also true. It was a 10 Acres Woods, which went up against the side of a river, the North Fork Salt River. And I and the other boys from the neighborhood, and when I say the neighborhood, I mean, you're a mile or more from anybody else, would get together and we rode horses and we'd go down there. And I had a place that I would go to after school myself. I would ride my horse back to an area that I call my heavenly spot. And I would just, I guess, do kind of the equivalent of meditation. I didn't know about meditation, didn't call it that. But I told my folks at the age of 9 that I was going to be a minister, and they said, well, okay. My mother was very religious. My father was okay, he'd go along, but he didn't have the depth of commitment to a spiritual life that mother did, but she was very committed. So when I was 13, I remember mother gave me this Bible, which I've still got here, red edition of the Bible, and I started reading it as much as I could at that age. And at 14, I had a bit of an experience. I was standing on the side of a hill, the hill that we lived on, and I stopped thinking. Now, I only know that because I started thinking again. And when I started thinking, I realized that for something had happened, that I had actually sort of stopped thinking. And when I kind of said to the universe, what was that? I heard a voice. And the voice said, who wants to know? That's all it said, just who wants to know, and nothing more profound than that. But I kind of really knew that I was going to spend the rest of my life trying to answer that question. So I went to college at a local denominational college nearby, about 100 miles away, which I knew had a pre-ministerial program that you could be involved in. The junior and senior students had opportunities to go preach in local rural Missouri churches. And I won't go through the whole story about how it happened, but some of you know, as it turned out, I wound up getting a job when I was 18 years old as a minister of 3 rural Missouri churches. I did that every Sunday throughout the time that I was in college. I would venture every Sunday morning off to some church somewhere where I would do the usual stuff, sermons. I was marrying people. I was performing funeral services, all during the college years. After that, I went to Southern California School of Theology in Southern California to get my master's degree in theology. And the first year, I was assistant minister of a large church in Glendale, California. And after 2 years, the senior minister was fired. I won't go into that, but I supported him rather than those who fought to fire him. And so I was out of job too. And I got a really good job at a girls' school, a prep school, as a chaplain and also as a teacher of world religions and world history and some other things. But that was a wonderful time. Fell in love with after reading or experiencing a slide show on the thought of Pierre Tolle de Chardin. Wound up writing my dissertation on the work of Pierre Tolle de Chardin, a French Jesuit priest and mystic, and wound up teaching classes on his work for many, many years thereafter. Came to New York to start doing doctoral work at the New School University in Greenwich Village in New York. And the second year that I was there, they were open to people proposing suggestions on classes that they could teach. And I suggested a class on mysticism. And by golly, to my surprise, I mean, I literally danced around the room when I got my acceptance letter. Okay, you're employed, and if you'd like to teach this class, teach it. Well, I wound up teaching courses in mysticism for 10 years, from 1969 up through 1979 at the New School University. And I broke that in that one class, and then I made 2 classes. So there was one in the spring and one in the fall. And then I went into 4 classes. So I had 4 different historical epochs from the ancient to the medieval, to the Enlightenment, to the modern, to the present time. And that was just a lot of fun and just kept getting drawn into the whole mystical approach. In 70, I went to Valmorin, Canada, where I worked with Swami there, and who taught me yoga over the course of the summer. And I also wound up doing a fire walking ceremony while I was there. And that was really interesting because I wondered if I could really do that. And I did do that. It wasn't my intention to do it, but I was going to write an article about it. So I said, could I go interview the people that were going to be doing the fire walking this summer? Well, if you really want to know about it, you should do it. So I signed up for it and wound up doing it. And of course, I did wind up writing an article about it. But that really deepened my interest in Indian philosophy. And the next year, 71, Hilda Charlton, whose picture Keith had up there on the screen, was going to join me in going to India. Our timing didn't work out exactly the same, so I would have to wait for her 5 days in Bombay before going to see Swami Sai Baba, and she didn't show up. And so what happened was, when she didn't show up, some people told me there was some excitement about this other guy whose name was Rajneesh, and I should go see him. And every day I would go and I would do the chaotic meditation stuff with him. And as it turned out, one day I got an interview with him. I actually remember we sat on his bed, believe it or not. It was a flat bed, right? And on a platform, and spending about a half hour together, just dialoguing. And I remember thinking, I would never be doing this with my the bishop of the church that I was serving at the time. I got a job, so I down taught the new school. I also got a job right away as a minister of a church in Brooklyn, New York, which I also did for that same 10-year period of time. So I was doing three things. I was a minister of this church, I was teaching at the new school, and I was working on the doctorate. But also having a lot of fun at that time. This was the dawning of the age of Aquarius, and things were changing, and we were going up against the war in Vietnam, et cetera, and all this wonderful music that was happening. And so it was a really exciting time. And kind of at the end of that time, I then transferred to a church back up here near where I live now, because I was just really aching to get back into nature again. I'd been in New York City long enough. And so they agreed to transfer me up here in the foothills of the Catskill Mountains now. And so that was a big improvement. And then in 1973, I wound up getting a book published by an organization I was working with called Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship. And there I met, among other people, Judy Whitson. And this is all pre-Course in Miracles now. So Judy and I became friends, and she was part of an organization that had people come to see different people to perform changing things on bending spoons and stuff like that, or Kirlian photography, or just whatever it was that was so exciting and going on at the time. And then in 73, I was giving a lecture in Chicago for this organization, Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship. I had actually become president of the organization by that time. And I wasn't the keynote speaker. That was Hugh Lynn Casey, Edgar Casey's son. But I did do a workshop. And as it turned out, Helen Schuckman and Bill Thetford, they were there. And they came to my workshop. And I was introduced to the two of them after that was over. And I don't think they said anything about A Course in Miracles. They did say that Helen had just written an inspirational book. And I actually remember looking at Helen, short woman, frizzy hair, big glasses, and thinking, oh, that's very nice. She's written an inspirational book. It's probably got some nice prayers in it. It does. That was our first meeting. And then 2 years later, I wrote a letter, which is published in the Journal of Transpersonal Psychology, expressing interest in being in contact with people who are working in the fields of psychotherapy and spirituality. And Bill saw my letter, told Helen he thought it was a call for her to complete the writing of the psychotherapy pamphlet. So she did. She called me in April 75, said she had something for me, and I agreed to go with me with her and Ken and Bill in Ken's little apartment in New York City. Helen sat on Ken's daybed, told me about the course, gave me the manuscript of the psychotherapy pamphlet as a starter. So I started at that point. Now, this interesting enough, about 6 weeks later, they met Judy Whitson. And when Judy got it, and Judy got really excited about it. And I thought, well, this is interesting. Judy's getting excited about this. Maybe I should get more interested in it too. So I started getting more and more into it. But the real thing that changed everything as far as mystical experiences are concerned, I do have one slide on this. So let me show you that. Was it in 1976, a friend of mine persuaded me to go with them to Mexico on a mystical journey. And so there the first time there, and we're running out of time, so I won't go into elaborating it, but we went into the jungles in Chiapas in southern Mexico. And this is Dr. Salvador Ruquet, who was a Mexican psychiatrist who was very interested in taking people through these kind of waking up experiences. And this is Maria Sabina, and I'll tell you more about her in a minute. So the first year, 76, so for 3 years, 76, 77, 78, we ventured down into Mexico to work with Salvador, and we worked with some very heavy-duty psychotropics. I don't mind saying that. That's exactly what happened. And the first year, Salvador here killed me. Now, what I mean by killing me is took me through a death experience. And you're blindfolded, you're laying on the floor in a hut in the jungles, by the way. He had earphones on, believe it or not, he brought along a suitcase full of batteries to take us through this experience. And I won't go through that in the interest of time, but just to say I had this really profound Kundalini experience where I was just shot out of my body and into another dimension altogether. And it was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying because of the death of the ego. I had to go through the death of the ego process. That's not fun. Letting go, body, space, identity of all sorts, planet Earth, mother, father, history, everything being wiped out. You know, so I didn't even know. Obviously, something remembers the experience, otherwise I couldn't talk about it. But that slate got wiped clean, completely clean. And I came back, of course, but I came back, I fell back. Again, I went through these different levels and stages. Time doesn't permit me to talk about the levels and stages I came through to come back, but I eventually did. It was the most profound experience in my entire life, as you can well imagine. So then I went back again in 77 and 78. I went back again for the third time. And this time we worked with Maria Sabina in her hut in Oaxaca. And this time we used psilocybin mushrooms. And this was an all-night experience as well, but very, very different from that one. That one drove me into hell. This time was totally different. I wound up spending the entire night rolling around on the floor in a Homeric laughter. Just couldn't stop laughing because I had like this, remember, into eternity where all is one. There kept us a mad idea which the Son of God remembered not to laugh. Well, I remembered to laugh. I got it. I got the absurdity of this whole world and what we're involved in here. And I wound up laughing the entire night long. There was a guy there from Germany who was also looking for, he was looking for the shaman of the Carlos Castaneda series, you know, Don Juan, and not really realizing that he was in the presence of Don Juan. So he had a very difficult experience. He kept moaning and groaning all night long, and I kept saying, come on, his name was Manfred, come on, Manfred, come on, Manfred, come on, Manfred. Like, the next day, you always process the next day. We were processing some of the other students, chided me for having done what I did with Manfred. And Manfred stopped them and said, no, I understood exactly what he was doing. You're trying to help me to rebirth, you know, to pull out, to come through this experience. That was very, very profound experience. And then I came back, that was in 79. And by the time I was up here, and at that point, I've never had any of those kind of experiences since that time. That was 78, 79. And then I never had another experience like that. That was a long time ago, what, 78 years ago, oh, 60 some years ago. And now I just teach a Course in Miracles. And I know, because I know that's the answer, but not just the Course in Miracles. Course in Miracles is central. It's absolutely golden. It will open the door for you. But also the Course of Love and other forms. In 72, I invited Rabbi Gelberman to come speak to the class on mysticism I was teaching on the Kabbalah, because I never had anything on the Kabbalah before, and I didn't know about it. So he came and did that, and then we became friends after that. he came and spoke in my church, and I went and spoke in his synagogue, etc. Well, that was just a bit of the journey, and the journey continues, and I'm very happy. I couldn't be more pleased with what I've seen and what I've been given, and the opportunities I have to continue to do this work. It's somebody asked me the other day if I was going to retire, and I I almost laughed because it's like retire. I'm having way too much fun to retire because exploring these ideas, going deeper and deeper and deeper. This is one thing that Ken Wapnick said. Ken became a very good friend, and I worked with him a great deal. I sponsored lectures by Ken in New York City back in the late 70s and the early 80s. And you got to keep taking this deeper because this is very, very deep. And it takes us all the way home again. And just knowing that your foot is on the path and that you're headed in the right direction, that alone is sufficient. Now, I think we're kind of out of time. I'm not going to take time to answer those questions because I think if in the view of time, if there's some general questions, we could do that. But okay.
Well, thank you, Jon. I really appreciate that. And yes, for those of us who have read some of your books, like the Missouri Mystic and others, we do recognize your very deep path, and it's quite powerful. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Okay, let me share here now. Okay.
Yeah, really. So truly appreciate that. Um, let's just do this real quick as I want to touch on the mysticism curriculum. The courses were co-created by Jon and Keith and myself to help us explore the deeper aspects of mysticism in all of the world's religions. As I mentioned before, that notion of what is that higher vibration that our mystics operate in. And it's a process, it really is. We all three talked about the fact that it's a process for us. It's an unfolding, it's a path, and it's a path that we choose to be on every day. And if you're interested in finding out more, we'd love to have you. We'd love to have you join us. You can go to allfaithseminary.org and find out more. You can email me or Keith or Jon, of course. In fact, I'll put in Jon's and my email so that you can have that. Jon's is jon@miraclesmagazine.org. So feel free to reach out to us if you've got questions, if you're interested. There's also an application we can send, and we can also have a chat and talk more about it. So if you're interested in exploring it, the program is designed very specifically to do the thing that Rabbi Gilberman asked us to do, every single one of us. Go deeper. Go deeper. Whatever your belief system is, go deeper. And that's the path of the mystic, right?
Mm.
And it's either deeper or higher, however you want to look at it, whatever works for you. But the notion is, again, we go back to that definition of what is a mystic? A person who seeks to know the heart and mind of God in however that unfolds. And here we all are. So I'll just open it up for any questions that anyone might have of anything or any of us that we've had all day. We're so appreciative of you joining us. Yeah, Alice.
I see now that you've got the Course in Miracles as a course of study too.
Yes.
I'll face
Yes.
seminary. I know in the course Jesus says he doesn't want another church.
Right.
And yet a number of people that go on these paths become ministers. And I'm finding that in the spiritualist and the metaphysical community too, is to what purpose is it to become a minister?
That's a good question. That is a great question. Let me tell you from an interesting point of view that I've had, right? And I'm sure that Keith and Jon can share as well. First and foremost, it gives me permission, so to speak, to talk about God. One of my favorite topics, because I'm a minister, right? And second of all, it from a legal point of view, it puts you into a different category, quite honestly. That's one of the advantages of it. And I won't go into a lot of detail on that, but if you're interested, I'll be happy to share. Here's the basic synopsis. My focus is on spiritual counseling. I've been doing that for a very, very long time. And I was ordained in my 30s. So I've always been able to go from that perspective of being a minister. It isn't a title that I wear a lot, and I don't really share it. But what it allows me to do is not to have conversations with the state psychiatry board about me practicing medicine without a license. I don't want to do that. I don't do Keith's work as a psychotherapist. That's not my role. But it is my goal is to help people become closer to God. That's spiritual counseling. And Keith does that too.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. No church. So, churches, any kind of organization just ends up with its own issues. I mean, and that's, it's the same in the Kriya Yoga lineage. No, don't set up an ashram, don't do this, don't do that, because just do the teaching. Now, granted, so you're a minister and you might talk here and there, but the point is to not get caught up in the administration of a facility or an organization where hierarchy starts and there starts to be arguments or this or that. So I think that is and my experience with the different people who come to who are associated with this seminary, they're not on that kind of road to have some big organization that then starts to dilute the teachings and people get lost in I'm this level, I'm that level, blah blah blah. You just experience, share. Everybody's kind of equal, and you move forward. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Keith. Appreciate that. Lois, go ahead. What question do you have for us?
Okay. This is wonderful today. Thank you for allowing us all to be here. So my first question, 2 questions. First question is, will future sessions of the Seeker's Compass be available to people who are not part of the seminary program?
Yes, we're going to set up a program to allow people to make a donation who would like to participate.
Okay, great. And then if somebody did want to be part of the seminary overall program with perhaps this as the focus, is there a deadline for admissions?
It's still open, if that answers your question. And so reach out, happy to talk with you about it. There's an application form on the website, allfaithseminary.org.
Okay, great, thank you.
You bet, thank you, appreciate that. And Jim.
Yeah, hi everybody, and hi Keith and Bud and Dr. Jon. I like that appellation for you. Obviously, all 3 of you have been very disciplined throughout your life on staying the course, let's say, on your path. And just wondering if there's a suggestion or advice you can give the rest of us, myself included, or especially myself, on developing a discipline to meditate or stay on the path every day, if that's possible.
If I can address that, I think let it become an addiction. No, I'm serious about let meditation, for example, become an addiction. Let study become an addiction. Let doing whatever you want to do become an addiction so that you would miss doing it. Let it going into nature become an addiction. You want to do this. You would feel funny if you didn't have the opportunity to do it. Practice the principles do the workbook lessons in the Course in Miracles. Let that become an addiction for you. Principle number 5 of the Course in Miracles says miracles are everyone's right, but miracles are habits. They shouldn't be under conscious control. Consciously selected miracles can be misguided. So I started to do the wrong principle. But let it become a habit. That's discipline. Then you feel funny if you didn't do it. if you do your yoga practice every day at the same time, and you do it for a couple of weeks or more, and then you're going to find, oh, I want to do that.
Yeah, I think establishing that is very important, and that brings another piece into it, and that's the ego, because the ego is often spoke of in a fairly condescending way by people in the spiritual communities in general, and but the ego can be very helpful in establishing that practice. So the ego should be in service to us. It should not be in charge, right? So the ego can think of that, as kind of your executive function. But if it's tantruming and it wants, whatever, ice cream or whatever, well, that's not where we're going. So you use the ego, and it's interesting, establishing a habit. You have to fit it into your routine in some way, right? Or else, if you put it somewhere and you're not going to have the time, well, it's just not going to happen. I spent a number of years listening to people about, their routine to help them like get meditation into it, so it'd be like, okay, so you get up and what do you do? Oh, well, well, I take a shower. Well, not always, sometimes I'll take the dog out first and then I'll have coffee and then I'll come back. Or, sometimes I'll do this, sometimes I'll do that. Well, maybe I'll do this first or that first, and, quite varied. And so I was like, and you can see it's people are like, oh, there's some thought process toward it. Oh, I'm not going to do this right now. I'm going to do it later, or maybe I'll skip it today or whatever. But, in the morning, well, if this is when there are things we do that we don't really think about. We don't try to talk ourselves out of it. And as far as morning routines go, so I ask people, I'm like, okay, so when you're about to get out of the shower or the bath, what do you do? What do you do? You reach for a towel, right? People say, I dry myself. Do you stand there at the edge of the shower deciding whether or not you're going to dry yourself off that day or not? Not necessarily. Maybe if there was no towel left for you, or or something. But right, it's kind of like, oh, so it's that kind of. So where in your day can you put something that, regardless of what's happening, you're going to step in and it's the next thing that you do. Even so, let's say, there's kids in the house or grandkids and there's, something happens, someone needs your help. You can still, so maybe you lose your 15 minutes, but you can still have your 30 seconds, maybe after the emergency or even, before it, where you can sit, change your focus and try to connect. So even if it's not, you don't have to do it for 2 hours, for 3 hours. Just connect to help you, maintain that. And then, yes, I agree with Jon that it's something you want to enjoy. You just have to enjoy it. So, so you have to find a practice that resonates with you, or tweak it in some way that it resonates with you. Yeah.
I want to add one thing to everything that was just shared, which was beautiful. That's something that was taught to me long, long ago. And that is a simple question that I ask myself all the time. Am I doing the most important thing that I could be or should be doing right now? Am I doing the most important thing that I could be or should be doing right now? And for me, that's connecting with the divine. There isn't anything more important than that. And so I ask myself that question, especially when I find, and I'm on the Enneagram, I'm a 7. So I'm like the little butterfly that goes around and visits every single flower because they're all fun. Okay. So that's me, highly distractible, ADHD without being diagnosed for it. I mean, I'm not, but it's the same thing. I'm highly distractible. So I have to ask myself that question. And I learned to ask myself that question a long time ago and developed tremendous willpower and self-focus and discipline as a result. Am I doing the most important thing that I could be or should be doing right now? So thank you for your question, Jim. Let's get Ken in here.
Things have been happening really rapidly for me. And something very strange happened last night. In the last month or two, circumstances have led that I'm pretty much meditating all the time. I know I have guides. I get clues and things like that. Never met one until last night.
Oh.
And it was strange because I felt the presence of two female characters. I think they were guardian angels or something like that. And they were there to help position me for some kind of a dispensation or something. And it was the strangest thing. I could almost see them, but one was sort of to my left and one was to the above me. And once I was in position, I received this, I'm not sure what I would call it, but it was a sense of power, just intense power. And immediately I felt elevated, and everything became more clear and certain, and it just brought tears to my eyes. It was kind of painful because it was so strong. The intensity of it was. And the point I wanted to make was that that's never happened to me before. Has anybody else had an experience like that before?
Yes.
It was a little bit, I wasn't expecting it.
Right.
And they did it a second time too, and it was even more intense. And now why they had to have me in a certain position for this to come through. But it was wonderful. And I feel like, well, first of all, I've got proof. I really do have guidance out there, and they're trying to help me.
The most important question that you can ask any guide is, what is your purpose? And what is this for? Right. And because you need to get to the why, you need to understand the relationship, right? To add a little humor.
Whether they're scary or not.
Right. Yes. And you have to find out both sides, because that brings me to my question of really one that we really all need to ask. And that is, are you a good witch or a bad witch?
Oh.
Right. And do you want to make me a sandwich? Because that would be bad. Right. So, and I mean, I joke, but this is one of the, Alice was mentioning channeling before. Well, this is one of the core questions that as a channel, you have to start that whole dialogue with, is understanding their intention, their purpose. The Course asks us to ask of everything, what is it for? And this is very, very important when you're asking whoever it is that is at a higher vibration that is trying to communicate with you.
Well, it was certainly, it gave me power. I feel like I have new power now.
Oh,
I've got abilities and trust and certainty that I didn't have before. But you're saying that there could be other ulterior motives or something I need to worry about?
No.
I'm just suggesting that you know that.
Okay.
What can I learn from you? What are you here to teach me?
Right.
A good question. A very good question.
Right.
What are you here to teach me? Yeah.
Well, I'm just wondering what's next.
What
I mean, almost anything could happen now.
That's right. That's the beauty of life.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it
Thank
very
you.
much. And Alice, did you want to come back and say something?
Well, Ken said it because your answer was really profound, because I've been asking questions a lot of why is this happening now that my sister's trying to speak through me, and I can't always understand it. So this morning, in the last few mornings, it's evolved into a dialogue where I will hear her talking to me, and then I'll say out loud what she's saying, and then I'll say out loud, because she said otherwise my mind wanders too much. And dialogue doesn't go as well in my head. So making it verbally speaking, not through my vocal cords, but me hearing what I'm saying, it's evolving into this question and answer this morning, exactly what you just addressed. Why is this happening? What is the purpose? Why are we now being able to communicate together? Right. It's a profound experience to know someone you passed on, a loved one, is still with you, and you're actually able to have a deepening of the relationship. It's been an incredible experience. So your bud was like really right on to what I was experiencing, and I hopefully hopeful to who just spoke. What's his name was Kenneth. that you never know what's going to come up, but just let it evolve.
Absolutely.
And be trusting your inner guidance in all of this too.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Alice. Appreciate that. All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. We've really appreciated your time, and we know we've gone over, but thank you for staying with us. And we do urge you to go to allfaithseminary.org if you'd like to find out more. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
And we appreciate you. Deep blessings.